everyone drank coffee. I'll try to keep it alive. So as mentioned, I'm Wes Herche, Director of Enterprise Sustainability at Prologis. Who has heard of Prologis? Oh my gosh, really? Okay, good. Can I confess? I know this is being recorded. We'll see. I had not when I first saw the job that I applied for about a year ago, actually, at this time, and then I was here working in now. I'd kind of heard of them, but I didn't know much of what they do, but I saw the company and I looked into it and I was like, that looks really cool. And now I'm here. I was at Amazon before that and was at Boston Consulting Group before that. But shockingly, I was like, I couldn't believe I didn't know this group. It is a quite large company. It's in the Fortune 500. It's the largest logistics real estate company on the planet, or we are, I should say. We have 1.3 billion square feet of real estate over 20 countries. So we are big. We own quite a bit of real estate. The other thing that I find interesting is 3% of all global GDP flows through a Prologis warehouse at some point. So, and if you took out services, by the way, out of the GDP, that number would jump to close to 10%. So somewhere in your house, on your body, in this room, almost certainly some of this material or these goods have flown or have gone through a Prologis warehouse at some point. So yeah, quite large. We'll get into, we're also the number 2 installer of solar in the US. Number 1 is a Target Corporation, who's actually a customer of ours, so that's really cool that we get to share that top distinction with them. We're tracking towards our goal for this year of 1 gigawatt of solar on rooftop, but we're at 825 megawatts. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I want to talk about how we got there, why I work in sustainability for Prologis, and what we do. So if you go back to 2019, we had set a target for net zero by 2040. We're also a signatory of the Climate Pledge. You can see since our 2019 baseline, that's the progress we've made so far in terms of reduction in Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. You can see we've almost eliminated our Scope 2. That actually wasn't a huge lift, to be honest. Oh, stand this way? Okay, great, thanks. That wasn't a huge lift, to be honest, because, I mean, it was, but we consume a lot less energy than what you think. We build warehouses, right? It's our customers who are inside there operating them and consuming most of the energy there. Because of that, so this gives a breakdown of where we are today. And again, I know it's not terribly interesting probably to hear someone talk about the sustainability targets and progress of their company, but I think it's a little bit unique in terms of what we have done about that. So if you look, 99.8% of all of our emissions are Scope 3. So those are indirect emissions. I assume everyone already knows how Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions work, but the way I always like to say, if you're explaining to a non-sort of ESG or sustainability audience, this is not 100% scientifically correct, but it's pretty close. I always say, if you burn it in something you own, that's Scope 1. If you plug it in, that's Scope 2. Everything else in your value chain is Scope 3. For us, that's 99.8% of our emissions. And within that, 70% of that is, which is essentially 70% of our emissions, is the power consumed by our tenants. Again, because our customers are some of the largest companies in the world, the Targets, Amazons, Walmarts, Maersk, CEVA, DSV, Starbucks, you name it. And they do a lot of stuff in those warehouses, right? And they have robotics and forklifts and lighting and heating and cooling, et cetera. The other 30% is the embodied emission, and that's mostly between steel and concrete. That's it. Everything else is kind of a rounding error, honestly. There's other stuff in there, right? And we work on those, but everything else, all the rest either sits in that 0.2% or, yeah, that's it. So this is not unique. A lot of companies have really large emissions allocations within their Scope 3. That's a sort of similar story. One of the things I found frustrating over the years in some of the companies I worked with, and I used to run supply chain decarbonization for Amazon, is a lot of times the way companies approach that is say, well, you know, this is a big data challenge. You know, it's so hard to get the data, Scope 3 is so complicated, there's so much stuff, there's so many companies, there's many tiers, et cetera. All correct, all difficult. What ultimately, and I was talking to Jody Golden at the break here, we were talking about how do you transform a business so that the core strategy of the business is also a way to tackle your emissions. Can you do that? Because if you can, then you start transitioning from ESG being a nice to have when times are good and we'll kind of do it for bragging rights or whatever. And I think we're solidly out of that era, thankfully, of maybe ESG 1.0 or sustainability 1.0, and start thinking about it as a core part of the strategy, not just in a cost center, but where you can grow with that. So we have 6 different areas. I'm going to break 2 of them down a lot because of the areas I work. But if you start up in the top left corner, scaling energy, mobility, and sustainability business, that's our business we have that does on-site energy solutions for a lot of different verticals, which I'll take you into. And then if you go down, addressing embodied carbon in construction, we talked about that. If you go to the right, adopting new construction standards, right? Because we are a major industry player in that warehouse space. So as we adopt those standards and push for new standards, we can help move the industry along as well as us. Let's go maybe bottom middle. Actually, I'm gonna save that one for last. When we go update and retrofit maintenance standards, it's another play for there. Increasingly bottom right, digitizing in terms of being able to optimize those portfolios and understanding that and what the customers inside our buildings are doing, so that way we can optimize to, again, tackle those emissions. And then bottom middle, that one's interesting. We actually have a ventures arm within our company. So they do primarily two things. One is they launch new initiatives within the company. So they're sort of like a R&D center, right? The other one, though, is they operate as a traditional venture capital fund. So they have quite a large fund. They have principals and investors and managing directors that will go and invest with the thesis of, can it help Prologis or Prologis customers? So that's across the entire logistics business. But there is a very prominent pillar in there within sustainability, and we've made a lot of investments in both hard tech and soft tech in that sustainability space. Again, because it's a way that you can go directly tackle that problem, and at the level that we're at, we're looking at that at an industry-wide and global level. But let's get into the meat of what I do, okay? So, I'll tell you another secret. We used to not jokingly, I don't know, we used to colloquially call this the building of the future. We'd say, wow, wouldn't it be great if you had solar and EV charging and battery storage and microgrids and LED lighting and building certifications and the ability to electrify your fleet and off-site power purchase agreements and a smart building management system? It would be amazing, right? All of these things are real. We do all of these things right now. I don't mean like I'm pitching you on, I'm like, I want to sell you, like actively in the field across 20 countries. We do all of these things. As far as I'm aware, we have not done all of these things in one building. I want to have that happen. I'm working on that right now. But these are all things that are real. So we said, well, that's not the building of the future. We're doing that right now. But it's kind of like, I joke a lot about, it's kind of like if we all went back in time 100 years and you took any building and you said, hey, like I got an idea. I want to put heating and water and this new thing called electricity. And you'd be like, and all in one building? You're like, that's crazy. You couldn't do that. You couldn't put all three of those things in one building. You'd have to be a millionaire, right? Like that would be nuts. This is what we're doing now, right? And the idea is, how do you normalize all this stuff? It's one thing like with the team, we come in and we work with customers to take the offtake agreement for the solar or for the EV chargers, et cetera. But again, the bigger picture goal with it, how do you transform the real estate industry, is to start to take these things and normalize them all. So that it's, if you bought a spec house in an addition where they build a lot out, sometimes they have those checklists of all the options you want. We're not there yet, to be clear, but like that's the future that we see, where it's just, you could just have these in a checklist for a new build, or if you're coming in and leasing a space from us and saying, these are the things I want, because that's what's gonna make my business sustainable. And again, that also obviously impacts our scope 3. That's a secondary effect, but really it's about how do we make our customers in those buildings reach their sustainability goals for operational impact and efficiency. So I'll dig into two of these verticals that we talked about. There's a couple of different product lines within those. So this one's renewable energy solutions. By the way, this is across our 1.3 billion square feet of real estate, but also other buildings as well. Any commercial building that's sort of warehouse space, that's our bread and butter, our sweet spot. We will do these projects. So on-site solar, for sure, that's rooftop. Like I said, that's the one where we built close to a gigawatt. We're trying to track to there. That was our goal by the end of this year that we set 5 years ago. Community solar, I have an example of this one actually in the deck later on, which I think is interesting too, because you have all this rooftop space, why not use it? Energy storage, which again, customers use this for both resiliency, also for time of use, arbitrage, for a lot of different ways that they're utilizing energy storage. And then utility scale storage, which is again, just taking advantage of the fact that we're a real estate player with a lot of land, frankly, right? In good areas where it may be of interest to the grid. And it also may be interest to our customers as well, where we can help with grid services and stabilization. Another line we have is around EV charging solutions and microgrids. So again, I have some examples of this at the end. Depots are, by the way, we're mostly talking commercial scale charging. So Class 8 vehicles, so semi-trucks for sure. You can actually charge your Tesla or whatever at these same charging sites, but typically the customers that we're working with, they're trying to electrify their fleets. They're doing that mostly because it's more cost advantageous, particularly as you scale those fleet electrification. But in order to do that, they say, okay, hey, like we rent this warehouse from you. We have trucks coming in there and doing cross-dock or inbound loading and unloading. They're sitting. If they're idle, they're burning diesel. They also need a place to charge if we electrify those. Makes them a better neighbor, is cleaner, is cheaper per mile. Can you build EV charging infrastructure so that we can charge those trucks there? But a lot of times it's a mix. They might still be using traditional semi-trucks, but they'll start mixing in EV fleets, and so that depot offering is how they charge that. The hubs are public. In fact, like we just launched one in Vernon, California. So again, you could drive, if you have an electric vehicle, you could go up there and drive and park and charge if you want, like the way you would at a supercharger. But typically those are made for buses, box trucks, semi-trucks, et cetera. And the idea is that, you know, as we start to build out more and more of those, and as others do, particularly along interstate routes, you can start to electrify those lanes, or whether you do third-party transport, if you have your own fleet, et cetera. And that once you know that that lane's complete, or you can get farther and farther, that opens up a lot of opportunities, again, in cost savings, obviously ESG goals, et cetera. Let's not leave out, again, your personal vehicle for your employees, so workplace charging, that's a big one for us. So we roll that out in quite a few locations. And then this last one's on demand. These are microgrids. This is both for resiliency and for prime power. A lot of times when you're trying to expand or go to a new location, or you have a lot of load increase in terms of your electricity consumption, a lot of times that interconnect can take a long time. As some of you worked in this space, you know. I'll give you an example of on demand. It's also in Los Angeles, actually, and where that solution can be islanded. You can have backup storage, et cetera. And again, this is another one for larger semi-trucks. Right, so I'm gonna give you 3 examples, and I think we're gonna get to go to the break. And if you have questions, ask me when we do the roundtable thing, because I think there's gonna be like 5 or 6 of us doing that. So I mentioned we are in 20 countries. This one is in the Netherlands. The customer is GXO, so you may be familiar with them. 100% net zero emissions on this building. This is a flagship building for us, the Eindhoven DC4. As you can see, quite a large solar system that's installed. This is a pretty massive facility. A lot of generation, 100% responsible concrete used, 83% energy offset for all the energy consumed in that building. And they have other options for that to get that last 17%. We clearly maxed out the roof on that with the 5 megawatt system, but this is part of what we do, right? Because now you can see all the benefits in addition to certifications, zero carbon certifications. For me, it's all about how can you go after those emissions at the point where they're generated or where the service is used. Because we know that's always a way to solve that problem locally. There's also something to be said, I think, for, somebody put it to me once, that everybody wants next day delivery, but nobody wants a warehouse in their neighborhood, right? We're all guilty of that. We want to make our customers better neighbors, right? So when we can talk about this next example with community solar, it's an example of this, but again, with the fleet electrification, the trucks are quieter, they're not emitting the diesel smog. If they're giving back clean energy into the community, that can make them a lot better neighbors, and us too, right? Our name's on the building as well. So yeah, that's key. Here's an example. This is a massive project distributed over quite a few rooftops, right? Through the Clean Power Alliance in California. This is because when you have these big, giant, flat rooftops for these warehouses, they're great for solar. But sometimes, you know, you could have a lot of intense robotics and electric forklifts and other stuff. Sometimes you don't, right? Like they're warehouses. Sometimes they're empty, sometimes they're not. There might not be large load, but why would you let all that rooftop go to waste? Sorry. So you can build community solar programs, and we have done, and we have a team that works on that. And again, it's 2 things. One, the points I made about giving back to the community for sure, but to be just really candid, right? It's about optimizing that resource that we have. We look at that and say, wow, 1.3 billion square feet across all these countries. That's 1.3 billion square feet of solar we could install. We're maybe 5%, I think, to that. And we won't do it in every building because there's always sort of specific circumstances, right? But that's a huge opportunity. And again, as I mentioned, when you start to think about this as a strategic driver for your business, not just as a cost center, but saying like we can fundamentally redrive the business and the industry with this, you start seeing opportunity space instead of things that, well, I got to clean up this or clean up that. We do have things to clean up, but again, those become opportunities. The last one I'll talk about, I talked about it briefly already. This is, we call it the Dinker microgrid. It's where the location's in Los Angeles. Dinker's the name of the street that it's on. Maersk is the customer for this under their performance team subsidiary. These are drayage runs trucks. So a lot of times we said when you're first trying to think about how do you solve that because you want the route from LA all the way to Houston to be electrified. We're not there yet. The country's not there yet. But if you did, that would be amazing because if you all don't know, Long Beach and Los Angeles are the number 2 and number 1 port in the entire Americas, like in terms of container volume. So whatever you have in your home that you're wearing, it probably came through that port, especially if you're on the West Coast, but even in the interior of the country, it's just massive. There's just so much that goes through there. So, okay, great. We want to electrify all of the arterial corridors for the ground transportation. Where can you start, right? Because we're capital deployers, but it's hard to deploy that much capital at once. Well, you could do drayage runs. How many people are familiar with drayage? Got a few. Okay, drayage is when you take the good, the container from the port to wherever the first place it is. It's usually like some kind of transfer warehouse. So in these 2 areas in LA, a lot of the trucks you see running around Los Angeles or Los Angeles County, they're doing, not all, but there's a lot that are doing drayage runs, right? They're trying to get that from the port to the first warehouse that it needs to go to. And this was a way to do that because you say, well, they're going to be in a local area. You know, range is an issue even for the electric fleets, but you know, maybe 100 miles or more per run, like, and that's on the high end. So you know, it's known, it's quantified. And they can run, there's 96 charging stalls in there, but they can run hundreds of trucks through there a day because they run in multiple shifts, and then they can charge while they're eating lunch or taking a break, go out, do another run, come back and charge. And a lot of times we've seen, like I did tours of this facility a couple different times with customers. Sometimes the truck drivers that have EV cars as well, they'll charge their personal car while they're out doing their truck run and then come back and swap them out. So yeah, it's cool. You know, like I said, 300 plus charging capacity per day. 18 megawatt hour backup of storage. This facility is fully islanded from the grid. This does not touch the LADPW grid interconnect. It will in another 2 years, I think. But initially we got a projection of 5 years. And we were like, we want to move faster than that. Our customer wants to move faster than that. So there's linear generators that convert gas, non-combustive. It's Mainspring's the name of the technology. There's a technology partner. Convert that to electricity. We then store that electricity in the battery pack, the BESS systems that we have there. And they can discharge directly from the generator or from the backup power. So that facility can run fully islanded from the grid. Excuse me. When it interconnects, now that customer just has more choices because they could optimize on price, they could optimize on carbon, they could optimize on time of day, they could charge with the grid or charge with the Mainspring generator. We have control systems in there that help them with that microgrid, but again, it just gives them more optionality with those additional options. Excuse me, recovering from a cold. So with that, we're building the world's largest distributed energy generation company within the world's largest global supply chain platform. One of the things that our current but outgoing CEO said when he was on Mad Money, Jim Cramer, I don't know what he calls the show now, Jim Cramer, the famous stock person. One of the things Hamid talked about a lot in that interview, disproportionately talked about, was thinking about if you are anywhere in that mix, you're a real estate owner, you're a tenant, a lot of times you just see yourself as a passive consumer of energy. And you just hope, if you're in this room probably, that it's decarbonized or being decarbonized. More and more, I would say we definitely do, and I think you will start seeing yourself as an active player in that space. You will be generating, you will be storing, you will be thinking about how you can make those moves to optimize for cost, to optimize for carbon or emissions. And that's a new space, right, that we're helping customers with through that journey. But that's a new area, right? That's unprecedented in our entire electric system. But in a way, like, it's kind of cool, right? Like our CSO, our Chief Energy Sustainability Officer, calls it power as a platform. And you start thinking about your space, again, as a tenant or as a landowner in that ecosystem. That role is changing. And if you're in this room, though, and you're thinking about those ESG opportunities, now you have a lot of other things that you can play with that you didn't have before. Those are tools to change the strategic direction of your company. So, yeah, I'll take more questions when we do our roundtable.
Wesley. All right, thanks for that. And thanks for picking